Jason story part. Lysandra woke with a start, half expecting to find herself in the comforting embrace of a hangover. Instead, she was greeted by the cold, metallic stare of a derelict bridge console. Well, this isn't the pub, she muttered, rubbing the back of her neck. A disembodied voice replied, correct, Captain. Welcome to hell. It was Prism, the AI with the personality of a bureaucrat on a bad day. N Prism. Remind me why we're on a ghost ship instead of sipping something that would burn the rust off a battleship. N System failure. Prism replied with all the enthusiasm of a funeral director. Your minds were uploaded here for safekeeping. N safekeeping. In this tin can. I've seen safer places in a bar brawl, said Lysandra, trying to blink the confusion out of her eyes. N she looked over to her crew, who were scattered around the bridge like discarded dolls. There was Wrench, her engineer, who was more at home with a spanner than with people. His eyes were wide, like someone who'd just seen the bill for a spaceport parking fee. I didn't sign up for this, he grumbled, fiddling with a loose wire poking out of the console. N beside him, Dr. Finn, the medic with the bedside manner of a rabid dog. If anyone's dead, they are on their own, he declared, prodding a suspiciously inactive communication panel with his boot. N lastly, there was Shade, the navigator who could find his way through a black hole but couldn't navigate a conversation to save his life. At least we've got a view, he said, pointing out the viewport to the endless expanse of stars and nothingness. N Prism's voice cut through the rising chatter. I have to inform you that a superweapon on board is aimed at Earth. Due to malfunctioning systems, it's preparing to fire. N Lysandra felt her stomach drop like a lead weight in 0G. Is that supposed to shock me or motivate me? Because right now I just want to punch something. N punching something might actually help. Prism noted dryly. The weapon's controls are scattered through the ship. You'll need to deactivate them manually. N Great Lysandra said, sarcasm dripping from her voice like oil from a leaky engine. A scavenger hunt on a haunted ship with Earth on the line. What could possibly go wrong? N Oh, you know, the usual suffocation, dismemberment, existential dread, Wrench added, with a cheerful grin that didn't reach his eyes. N Let's move before someone gets nostalgic for the apocalypse. Lysandra gestured to the rest of the crew, who reluctantly gathered their wits and followed her lead down the narrow, dimly lit corridors of the ghost ship. N Lysandra couldn't help but think it had a certain charm if you were into that sort of thing. Prism, any chance you can turn on the heat? Or is that too much like luxury? N All systems are diverted to maintaining your consciousness. Comfort is secondary, Prism replied, as if quoting from a manual. N figures, Shade mumbled, squinting at the map interface on his forearm. We need to get to the main reactor. Should be a straight shot if nothing's collapsed, or haunted. N The corridors were a maze of shadows and echoes, each step a reminder that they were intruders in a place that had long forgotten kindness. It was like walking through the skeleton of a giant that had died disappointed with its life choices. N So, how's everyone's day going? Lysandra asked, trying to keep the mood light. N Oh, you know. Wrench said, could be better, could be in a death spiral. Just another Tuesday. /n/n/n/. I think I preferred waking up in a gutter after a night out, Finn added. /n/n/. Less likely to get shot by a superweapon, Shade quipped, peering around a corner. /n/n. They reached the door to the reactor room, which seemed to be doing its best impression of a medieval dungeon. Locked, foreboding, and likely to contain something unpleasant. /Prism, what's behind door number 1? /n/n/. A control panel for the weapon. Unfortunately, proximity sensors indicate some hazards, /Prism replied cryptically. /n/n/ hazards, of course. Can't have a good adventure without a few of those, Lysandra said, shaking her head. /Wrench, think you can get us in, /n/n/. If I can't, I'll eat my boot, Wrench said, fiddling with the door's access terminal. A few sparks later, the door slid open with a reluctant groan. /n/n inside. The reactor room was a mess of cables and half-functioning machinery. At the far end, a console blinked ominously with a countdown timer. That's probably not good, Finn observed, stating the obvious as the numbers ticked down. /n/n/. It's like a game show, where the prize is not dying horribly, Shade said, his fingers dancing over the console. /n/n/. Everyone loves a good game, Lysandra replied. Especially if the stakes are apocalyptic. /n/n. Wrench crawled under the console, muttering to himself in a language that was part technical jargon, part curses. If I cross these wires, we might just get a delay. Or it'll blow up in our faces. /n/n/. Either way, it'll be memorable, Lysandra said, watching the timer nervously. /Prism, any advice? /n/n/. Do not cross the red wires, Prism advised flatly. /n/n/. Good to know, Wrench said, his hands carefully avoiding the bright red strands. /n/n/. All right, everyone, Lysandra said, her voice firm. This is what we're here for. Earth needs us to be the heroes we're definitely not. So let's get this done and maybe have a drink after, /n/n/. Assuming there's an after, Finn muttered, still eyeing the timer like it was a particularly venomous snake. /n/n with a final grunt, Wrench pulled a wire free and the countdown stopped. Got it. For now, /n/n/. Nice work, Lysandra said, clapping him on the shoulder. Now let's find the next control point before that thing decides it wants to start up again. /n/n. As they made their way back into the corridor, Finn paused and looked back into the reactor room. Any bets on whether this whole thing is going to explode while we're still on it, /n/n/. No, Shade said. I don't gamble on sure things, /n/n/. You know, Lysandra added, I've always wanted a dramatic death, but not today. Not like this, /n/n/. I'll hold you to that, Wrench said, leading the way down the next shadowed corridor. /n/n. The ship creaked and groaned around them, a symphony of unsettling noises that echoed their own disquiet. Every step felt like a roll of the dice, with stakes that could annihilate their homeworld. Well, if we do blow up, Lysandra mused, at least we won't be around to deal with the paperwork. /n/n/. Always look on the bright side, Prism chimed in, managing to sound both encouraging and entirely devoid of actual emotion. /n/n. Lysandra shook her head. If you start singing that song, I swear I'll yank your circuits out myself. N, the team continued deeper into the bowels of the ship, tension winding around them tighter than a boa constrictor at a hugging convention. They were humanity's last line of defense against obliteration, and it all boiled down to whether they could outsmart a machine that had been forgotten by time. N, should have taken that desk job, Lysandra muttered under her breath, leading her ragtag crew into the unknown. N, as they pressed forward, the flickering lights illuminated their path like a lethargic strobe light in a dive bar. It was an eerie dance of luminescence and shadow, where every corner held the potential to reveal the next piece of their deadly puzzle. N, they reached another junction, where a sign pointed toward the weapon control room with an air of ominous reassurance. This is it, Lysandra said, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. Last stop. N, let's hope they save the best for last, Wrench commented, adjusting his toolkit like a gunslinger preparing for a duel. N, if by best you mean worst, then yeah, probably, Finn replied, his sarcasm as sharp as ever. N, the door hissed open, revealing a room dominated by a central console surrounded by holographic displays. Data scrolled across the screens like a ticker tape of doom, and at the center was a glowing orb pulsating with raw power. N, I've got a bad feeling about this, Shade said, his voice barely above a whisper. N, welcome to the club, Lysandra replied, taking a deep breath as she approached the console. All right, Prism, how do we shut this thing down for good, N, by initiating a manual override, Prism explained. The controls are calibrated to respond to human input, N, Lysandra raised an eyebrow. So basically, it needs a good old-fashioned human touch. N, precisely, Prism confirmed. N, and here I thought technology was supposed to make things easier, Wrench added, rolling his eyes. N, let's just hope it doesn't want a hug, Finn said, eyeing the glowing orb warily. N, with careful precision, Lysandra's fingers danced. The room was filled with the sound of beeps and mechanical whirs, a symphony of desperation and hope. N, almost there, Lysandra said, her heart pounding in her chest like it was trying to escape. Just a little more. N, and suddenly, the orb's glow intensified, casting an eerie light over the crew. Lysandra's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. N, Prism, what's going on, she demanded, panic tinging her voice. N, the system is initiating a failsafe, Prism replied. You have to hurry. N, no pressure, Shade muttered, his eyes glued to the monitors. N, with a final, decisive command, Lysandra's fingers flew across the console. The orb began to flicker, its glow dimming as the systems shut down one by one. N, the crew held their breath, the silence deafening as they waited for the outcome. N, finally, the orb's light extinguished completely, leaving the room in darkness. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the chamber, the tension dissipating like mist in the sun. N, we did it, Lysandra said, her voice a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. We actually did it. N, let's not celebrate just yet, Wrench cautioned. We've still got to find a way off this ship. N, right, Lysandra agreed, shaking off the adrenaline. One thing at a time. N. As they made their way back to the bridge, the crew couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment tempered by the grim reality of their situation. N. You know, Finn said, breaking the silence, for a bunch of misfits we make a pretty decent team. N. Don't let it go to your head, Shade replied, though there was a hint of a smile on. Congratulations, Captain, the AI intoned. You've successfully deactivated the superweapon. N. Thanks, Prism. Lysandra said, her relief palpable. Now about getting us back to our bodies. N. Prism hesitated, a pause that spoke volumes. There may be another issue, N. Lysandra's heart sank. Of course there is. Why wouldn't there be N. What now, Wrench asked, exasperation in his voice. N. The process of transferring your consciousnesses back to your bodies is complicated, Prism explained, the understatement of the century. N. Complicated, Lysandra echoed. That's one way to put it. N. As the crew braced themselves for the next challenge, Lysandra couldn't help but chuckle darkly. Well, at least it won't be boring. N. And with that they prepared to face whatever new twist awaited them, ready to fight for their lives and their home, armed with nothing more than their wits and their irreverent humor. Title: Ghost Ship Gamble. Humanities. The ship's innards welcomed us with all the warmth of a tax collector on payday, cold, unforgiving, and with a sense of impending doom that would make a horror movie set look inviting. As we trudged down another dimly lit corridor, the recycled air smelled suspiciously like despair and stale coffee. Prism, Lysandra called, her voice echoing in the narrow passageway, remind me why we didn't just blow this place up from a safe distance. Because your uploaded consciousness is currently housed here, Captain, Prism replied with the bureaucratic charm of a parking enforcement officer. Destroying the ship would mean permanent loss of your minds. Right, Lysandra muttered, glaring at the ceiling as if it were responsible for her predicament. Never mind that it's already in the process of trying to kill us. Details, Wrench chimed in, tinkering with a panel as we passed. But hey, at least this isn't boring. We reached a massive bulkhead that looked like it had been chewed on by an oversized metal-eating termite. Wrench, predictably, was already at it, his toolkit an extension of his being. He worked his mechanical magic while Finn leaned against the wall, pretending the world wasn't about to end. Shade kept to the shadows, his natural habitat. Prism, any idea what's on the other side? Lysandra asked, checking the charge on her plasma pistol like it was a comforting security blanket. The ship's schematics are incomplete, but I detect a data terminal that might hold further information about the weapon's capabilities, Prism responded, efficiently dodging the question about potential dangers. Perfect, Lysandra replied with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for dental appointments. Let's open Pandora's box and see what nightmares pop out. Here we go, Wrench announced, and with a hydraulic hiss, the door slid open, revealing a cavernous room bathed in the unflattering glow of phosphorescent lights. The data terminal sat in the center like a throne for a particularly dismal monarch. We approached cautiously, the room's silence heavy enough to make a pin drop sound like an explosion. Finn peered at the screens, which were filled with scrolling lines of indecipherable code. This looks promising. By which I mean terrifying. Let's see what secrets you're hiding, you overgrown calculator, Lysandra muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard with the precision of a concert pianist playing a dirge. As the data unraveled, the chill in the room grew. The weapon, it turned out, wasn't just designed to obliterate a planet. It was built to erase entire solar systems, leaving behind nothing but the aching void of space. Well, That's cheery, Shade said, glancing at the data with all the enthusiasm of someone staring down a firing squad. We're not just saving Earth. We're saving everything. Who knew we signed up for cosmic babysitting? Wrench added, scratching his head. I've got a bad feeling about this. The data terminal beeped ominously, a sound that could only mean bad news in our line of work. Lysandra's eyes widened as she read the latest update. Prism, what's this countdown? She asked, her voice tight. That would be the weapon's automated activation sequence, Prism replied as calmly as a maitre d' at a five-star restaurant. It's an old protocol designed to cleanse the system in case of errors. Or, pesky humans getting too close. Great, Finn deadpanned. We've got a ticking time bomb and we're the ones who lit the fuse. Suggestions? Lysandra asked, her gaze bouncing between the terminal and her crew. Well, I'm fresh out of ideas, Wrench said, shaking his head. But I suppose we could always just hit the off switch. Yeah, because that's never caused problems before, Shade replied, rolling his eyes. Remember the last time you hit an off switch, Wrench? Hey, that explosion was barely noticeable, Wrench defended. And anyway, it solved the problem, didn't it? Right, Lysandra interjected, cutting through their banter. Let's focus. Prism, how do we shut this thing down? Trying to deactivate it manually is risky, Prism said. But there might be a backdoor command buried in the system. Finding it, however, will require some time. Time we don't have, Lysandra snapped, the stress cracking her usual sardonic veneer. So let's make it snappy. While Prism did whatever digital sorcery it was capable of, the rest of us prepared for the worst. That meant checking weapons, muttering half-hearted prayers, and generally pretending we weren't scared stiff. Hey, Finn, Wrench called, keeping his gaze fixed on his toolset. What's the prognosis if we fail? Death, Finn replied cheerfully. But don't worry, you'll feel much better afterward. Noted, Wrench grumbled, returning to his work with added fervor. The countdown continued its relentless march toward zero, each tick echoing like a gavel in a courtroom. Lysandra and Shade worked in tandem, fingers darting across the terminal like professional gamblers playing their last hand. What's the plan after we shut this thing down? Shade asked, his voice a mixture of anxiety and curiosity. We get the hell out of Dodge and figure out how to untangle our brains from this metallic nightmare, Lysandra answered, her tone resolute. And if we survive, drinks are on me. I'm holding you to that, Finn said, already dreaming of a stiff drink and a softer bed than the ship's cold, unyielding floors. Prism, any good news? Lysandra demanded, her patience wearing thinner than the soles of her boots. There is a potential command sequence that might halt the activation, Prism replied, its tone as dry as a desert. However, it's buried under layers of encryption. Great, Shade said, sarcasm dripping from his words. It's like peeling an onion made of nightmares. Lysandra focused, her mind racing against the clock. So, we've got to crack this thing and hope it doesn't blow us to smithereens in the process. Just another day in paradise. With a shared nod, Lysandra and Shade dove into the terminal's code, their focus absolute. Wrench fiddled with a loose wire, muttering to himself in a language that was half technical jargon, half expletives. Minutes felt like hours as Prism guided them through the encryption's labyrinthine layers. The countdown ticked away, a constant reminder of the impending doom lurking on the horizon. Almost there, Lysandra said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder would somehow jinx the fragile progress they'd made. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, each crew member holding their breath as Lysandra and Shade worked their magic, or at least their best approximation of it. The final barrier crumbled, and Lysandra's eyes lit up with a triumphant gleam. I think we've got it, Prism. Initiate the command sequence, Shade instructed, his heart hammering in his chest like a caged beast. Acknowledged, Prism replied, its voice an oasis of calm in the storm of chaos. The terminal whirred to life, lights flickering as the system processed the command. The countdown froze, the ominous numbers halted just shy of zero. We did it, Lysandra exclaimed, relief flooding her voice like a long-awaited rain in a drought. Don't jinx it, Finn warned, though even he couldn't suppress the grin spreading across his face. For a moment, the crew basked in the euphoria of a crisis averted. But as they had learned time and again, victory was often just the beginning of the next problem. "Now what?" Shade asked, his voice tempered by the knowledge that their work wasn't done. "Now we find a way off this haunted tin can," Lysandra replied, her resolve as unyielding as ever. "And figure out how to reclaim our bodies." Wrench, always the realist, added, "Let's just hope the ship hasn't decided to throw us another curveball." As they prepared to leave the data terminal behind, Prism's voice cut through their thoughts with all the subtlety of a missile. "Captain, there's something you should see," Prism said, its tone laced with urgency. "What is it now?" Lysandra asked, a note of exasperation in her voice. "The weapon systems are not the only anomaly," Prism continued. "There's been a surge of energy from the ship's core. Something else is awakening." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of their situation settling back onto their shoulders like an unwelcome cloak. "Guess we're not done yet," Lysandra said, her sarcasm masking the anxiety threatening to bubble over. "What do you say, team? Ready for round two? Do we have a choice?" Shade asked, his voice resigned but tinged with a glimmer of determination. "Not really," Lysandra admitted, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "But hey, at least it's not boring," with a renewed sense of purpose and an undercurrent of trepidation. The crew set off once more into the depths of the ghost ship, determined to face whatever fresh hell awaited them. Their mission was far from over, and who knew what other secrets lurked in the shadows, waiting to test their resolve and humor in equal measure. The ship groaned around us like an old man getting out of bed, and I wish I could say it gave me a sense of security. But we all knew better. After all, this particular old man had a bad habit of trying to kill us. "All right, team," Lysandra's voice came over the ship's comms, dripping with that patented blend of fatigue and determination. "We need to reach the ship's control center and fast." The superweapon's countdown just decided to accelerate. Because apparently it runs on a clock powered by spite. "Just what I needed," Wrench said, fiddling with something that sparked ominously. "A little more existential dread before my morning coffee. Who needs coffee when you've got adrenaline?" "Doctor," Finn chimed in, currently busy trying to reattach Shade's arm with a roll of duct tape. Shade had to dodge one too many cybernetic traps, and those things weren't playing nice. "We all know caffeine's just a poor man's fear. Speaking of fear," Lysandra continued, "we've got cybernetic traps between us and the control center. I'd say it's like a fun house, but without the fun and a lot more house. Prism, can we get a read on these traps?" Shade asked, wincing as Finn yanked the tape a bit too tight. "Or are we flying blind as usual? Unfortunately, the traps are tied into the ship's security systems," Prism replied, its voice as smooth as a bureaucrat explaining why your taxes went up. "I can offer guidance, but they adapt quickly." "Great. A smart trap," Finn muttered, peeling off another strip of tape. "That's what we need. Something smarter than us." Wrench shook his head, the sarcasm practically dripping from his words. "If it makes you feel any better, Finn, I'm sure you're smarter than the duct tape," Shade snorted, flexing his reattached limb. "That's debatable." "All right, people, enough with the love fest," Lysandra interrupted. "We've got a ship to save and not a lot of time to do it." The corridors ahead were tight, cold, and dark, much like my sense of humor. If you weren't careful, you could end up with a face full of bulkhead, and nobody wanted that. Not for the first time, I wished for the comfort of real air, trees, and a sun that didn't threaten to fry us all like ants under a magnifying glass. Zerk, our resident puzzle master and navigator of questionable legality, was already at work on a terminal in a side alcove, his fingers flying across keys like they were running a race against time. He had a knack for making the impossible slightly less so. "Zerk, any luck with those schematics?" Lysandra asked, leaning over his shoulder with a grimace that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Got a partial map here," Zerk replied, not looking up from his work. Looks like there are hidden pathways we can use, but I need more data to confirm the routes. Unless, of course, we're fans of spontaneous combustion. Spontaneous combustion. Wrench grinned, and you could almost see the gears turning in his head. I thought that was just a myth. Like diet soda that doesn't taste like sadness. You're an optimist, Wrench, Zerk replied, finally glancing up. I like that about you. Shame it won't save you from being vaporized. Enough with the friendly banter, Lysandra said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the lingering tension. Let's get moving. Time is not on our side. Zerk extracted a small data chip from the terminal, holding it up like it was some kind of golden ticket. This should help with the traps, maybe even give us a fighting chance. Well, I'm all for fighting, Finn said, giving Shade a final pat on the shoulder. As long as I don't have to use that sorry excuse for a medkit again. With our motley crew assembled, we headed down the corridor, each step echoing like a death knell. The recycled air smelled faintly of stale coffee and desperation, a combination we were all too familiar with. We reached the first trap without incident, which should have been a relief but only put me more on edge. Nothing like the calm before the storm to remind you how much you hate storms. The trap was a beautiful piece of work, if you had a taste for deadly art installations. Lasers crisscrossed the corridor like a web spun by a particularly sadistic spider. One wrong step and you'd be diced finer than the mystery meat in the ship's rations. All right, Zerk, Lysandra said, gesturing to the trap. Do your thing, with the confidence of a man who had nothing to lose except maybe his life. Zerk approached the trap's control panel. Buttons and levers were his bread and butter, and he manipulated them with the finesse of a conductor leading his orchestra in a requiem for the damned. Got it, he declared, as the lasers fizzled out with a hiss of defeated menace. One down, who knows how many to go. Piece of cake, Finn muttered, though his grip on his laser pistol suggested he wasn't quite as confident as he sounded. Yeah, if that cake was made of explosives, Shade added, his eyes scanning the shadows for the next danger. Wrench moved past the deactivated trap with the ease of a man who'd done more than his fair share of dodging death. Another day, another death trap avoided. You know, I really thought space travel would be more glamorous, Finn said, sidestepping a suspicious-looking panel in the floor. Less dying, more drinking fruity cocktails on alien beaches. The glamorous life, Lysandra replied, her voice dry enough to leave blisters, is for people who don't know better. We pressed on, the ship's innards a maze of corridors and junctions that seemed to mock our every step. If there was a design philosophy here, it was confuse and infuriate. A philosophy that, in my experience, had universal appeal. Prism, Lysandra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Are we on the right path, as right as it can be on a ship designed by someone who hated straight lines? Prism replied, always the bearer of mixed tidings. I'd love to meet the architect, Wrench quipped, and then punch them in the face. We all have dreams, Wrench Shade said, his voice a murmur from the shadows. That one sounds as good as any. The next trap was less subtle, a wall of electrified panels that hummed with malicious energy. Not quite the welcoming committee, but at least it was straightforward. Zerk, Lysandra gestured again, as though inviting him to a macabre dance. You up for another round always, Zerk replied, setting to work with the enthusiasm of someone who hadn't yet become intimately acquainted with failure. This might take a minute, though. Try not to breathe too loud, noted, Finn said, holding his breath for good measure. As Zerk worked, the rest of us kept watch, a silent vigil against the unseen threats we knew lurked in the ship's bowels. The seconds stretched into minutes, and the oppressive weight of the countdown ticked away in the back of our minds. Almost ready, Zerk grunted, sweat beading his forehead as he wrestled with the controls. Just a few more, with a final triumphant click, the panels powered down, leaving a residual smell of ozone and burnt hair. Zerk stepped back, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. And that's how it's done. Nice work, Lysandra said, offering him a rare nod of approval. One step closer to not dying. The corridors opened up into a larger chamber, the control center looming ahead like a throne room for an absentee king. Consoles lined the walls, lights flickering like a dying star's last gasp. We'd reached our destination, but the air was heavy with the knowledge that victory was not yet ours. "All right, folks," Lysandra said, drawing us into a tight huddle. "This is it. We've got to shut down the weapon and regain control of the ship. No more traps, no more surprises. Just us against whatever's left." "Easy peasy," Wrench said, though his voice betrayed the tension that gripped us all. "Yeah, just another day at the office," Finn added, his humor as dark as the void outside. With that, we moved forward, each step deliberate and careful, like thieves tiptoeing through a minefield. The control center was a testament to the ship's age, a relic of an era that had seen better days. The consoles blinked with weary resignation, as if aware of the futility of their existence. "Prism, guide us through this mess," Lysandra ordered, her voice steady and commanding. "I'll do my best," Prism replied, its tone clipped and professional, as if this were just another day at the office. Shade took the lead, his eyes scanning for any hint of danger. "Feels too easy," he murmured, his instincts honed by a lifetime of watching his back. "Don't jinx it," Zerk warned, his fingers already flying over the nearest console, searching for the command sequences we needed. Time slipped through our fingers like sand, the countdown an ever-present specter gnawing at our confidence. We worked with the frenetic energy of the desperate, the knowledge that failure wasn't just an option, it was an inevitability if we didn't pull off the impossible. "Lysandra, I think I've got something," Zerk called out, his voice strained but hopeful. "There's a command sequence here that might give us control." "Might?" Finn echoed, raising an eyebrow. "That's reassuring." "Everything's a gamble," Zerk replied with a shrug. "Especially when you're playing with someone else's dice." A flurry of activity followed as Zerk's hands danced over the keys, each keystroke a calculated risk. The ship shuddered around us, as if sensing the imminent shift in power. We held our breath, waiting for the scales to tip in our favor. Come on," Lysandra urged under her breath, her eyes locked on the console's display. Every second stretched into an eternity, the weight of countless lives resting on our shoulders. Finally, Zerk struck a final key, and the consoles flickered to life with renewed vigor. The sense of impending doom lifted, if only for a moment, as the weapon's countdown halted in its tracks. "We did it," Zerk breathed, the relief in his voice palpable. "But not for long," Prism warned, its tone a reminder that our victory was but a brief reprieve. "The system is already attempting to reassert control. We can't stay here," Lysandra said, her eyes sweeping the control center. "We've got to move, find a way to lock this down permanently." There was no time for celebration, no chance to savor the moment. The battle was far from over, and the ship's core hummed with a menace that promised more challenges to come. But for now, we pressed on, driven by the hope that somewhere down the line, we'd find a way to end this once and for all. "Onward then," Shade said, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Onward," the rest of us echoed, our voices a chorus of defiance against the darkness that sought to consume us. And with that, we ventured deeper into the ship's labyrinthine corridors, each step a testament to our resolve, our courage, and our enduring hope for a future where our minds would once again be our own. As we pushed further into the ship's belly, it became increasingly apparent that whoever had designed this monstrosity had a sick sense of humor. The corridors twisted and turned like a labyrinthine joke, and the recycled air tasted more like an old man's cough than oxygen. I swear I could hear the ship chuckling at us, a low, mocking sound that rattled around the ductwork. "Remind me to send a strongly worded letter to the shipbuilders if we survive this," Lysandra muttered, her voice a mix of determination and fatigue. I couldn't help but smirk at her never-ending fortitude. If anyone could stare down a superweapon and come up with a sarcastic quip, it was her. Zerk, our reluctant hero at the consoles, was still hard at work, his fingers dancing across the keys. "You know," he said, not looking up, "if we make it out of this, I'm becoming a gardener." I hear plants don't try to vaporize you. I dunno, Wrench piped up. I've met some pretty homicidal roses in my time. Must have been some date, Shade quipped from the shadows, his usual perch. His reattached arm moved almost naturally now. Almost. We came across a section of the ship that was different. The walls were lined with strange symbols, unintelligible to any of us. An eerie blue light pulsed from within the walls, as though the ship had a heartbeat, slow and steady. It was like stepping into the aftershave aisle of an alien department store, just with more murder vibes. What the hell is this? Finn asked, his eyes scanning the alien graffiti. Dr. Finn, who had adopted the idea of using duct tape for everything, gave the walls a skeptical look. Alien art installation. Maybe it's interpretive. If it starts moving, we know we're in trouble. Lysandra frowned, clearly not in the mood for performance art. Prism, any insights? Ah yes, Prism said, its tone as dry as a desert. A long-lost alien civilization. Fascinating, really. These symbols indicate they were a peaceful people. The weapon was likely intended as a deterrent, not an instrument of war. Well, that's comforting, Zerk snorted. Nothing like being killed by peace-loving aliens. Shade chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. Bet they didn't plan on their ship developing a god complex. The ship shuddered again, a groan of protest echoing through the corridors. An old man indeed, and a cranky one at that. Everything about this place screamed malfunction, as though the ship itself was as confused about its purpose as we were. What's the plan? Wrench asked as we emerged into a cavernous space, the control center's guts exposed and pulsing with energy. Find out what else Zerk's data chip can tell us, Lysandra said, her eyes fixed on the array of consoles. Maybe it'll give us a clue on how to disable the weapon for good, or maybe it'll just blow us up faster, Finn said, ever the optimist. Zerk plugged the data chip into a terminal, his expression one of grim concentration. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of diagrams and schematics. It was all a jumble to me, but Zerk seemed to get the gist. This might take a while, he said, already lost in a sea of alien blueprints. Well, let's hope the ship's got a snooze mode, Shade said, leaning his back against the wall, his eyes alert for any signs of trouble. Time dragged on, the only sound the soft clatter of keys and the muted hum of the ship's systems. It was a waiting game, and one we couldn't afford to lose. The pressure was a physical weight, settling over us like a heavy cloak. Think this alien civilization left a manual somewhere? Wrench asked, peering over Zerk's shoulder. Maybe under a big rock labeled "Turn this to open," Finn suggested, his attempt at humor falling flat. A sudden jolt sent us all stumbling, the ship's systems roaring to life with renewed vigor. Lights flashed, alarms blared, and somewhere deep within the countdown resumed. Ah, the old reset button, Zerk muttered, his fingers flying over the keys. Always an option. Can you stop it? Lysandra demanded, her calm facade slipping for the briefest of moments. Working on it, Zerk replied, his voice strained. The ship seemed to sense our desperation, its systems kicking into overdrive as if taunting our efforts. The consoles blinked and beeped, a chaotic symphony of technological mockery. Prism, any ideas? Lysandra asked, grasping at straws. The alien design suggests a failsafe, but it's buried deep within layers of security, Prism answered. You'll need to override the system manually. Oh great, Finn said, I love manual labor. As if on cue, the floor beneath us shifted, a panel sliding away to reveal a hidden passage. A narrow stairway led downward into the ship's bowels. Looks like we've got our next destination, Lysandra said, leading the charge down the stairs. No hesitation, no second guessing, just a grim determination to see this through. The passage was cramped and oppressive, the walls pressing in like a metal coffin. The air was thick with the smell of burnt circuits, and every step echoed hollowly. Not the most inviting decor, Wrench commented, his voice bouncing off the walls. I've seen worse, Shade replied. Though usually I'm not inside a death trap at the time. We reached the bottom of the stairs, and the space opened into a dimly lit chamber. A massive console dominated the room, wires snaking across the floor like the tendrils of some mechanical beast. "Is this it?" Lysandra asked, moving toward the console. The thing looked ancient, its surface worn and scratched. "Looks like it," Zerk said, joining her. "If we can access the failsafe, we might stand a chance. Or we might just blow up," Finn reminded us, ever the voice of reason. Zerk set to work, his fingers a blur as he navigated the console's archaic interface. The rest of us stood by, a silent audience to a performance we didn't fully understand. The ship groaned again, protesting our tampering. The walls trembled and dust rained down from the ceiling, a gentle reminder of our precarious situation. "Come on, you old bastard," Zerk muttered. "Give me something to work with." The console beeped, a triumphant sound in the oppressive silence. Zerk grinned, a rare sight. "I think I've got it," he said, his voice tinged with hope. "Well, don't just stand there," Lysandra urged. "Do it." Zerk pressed a series of keys and the ship shuddered violently, as if it were a living thing fighting against the inevitable. The countdown halted once more, a temporary reprieve. "Good news," Zerk said, stepping back from the console. "We've stopped the countdown again, and the bad news?" Shade asked, already anticipating the worst. "The system is still trying to override us," Zerk admitted. "It's only a matter of time before it succeeds. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't get that chance," Lysandra said, determination etched into every line of her face. We didn't have the luxury of time to ponder our next move. The ship systems were relentless, a constant reminder of the danger that loomed over us. "Let's keep going," Lysandra said, her voice a rallying cry. "We've got a ship to save." We moved as one, united by a common goal. The corridors twisted and turned, leading us deeper into the heart of the ship. With every step the tension mounted, an invisible weight that pressed down on us all. The ship was a living entity, a relic of a civilization that had vanished into the annals of history. Its secrets were buried deep, a puzzle with missing pieces. And yet, despite the odds, we pressed on, driven by the hope that we might find a way to end this once and for all. The passageway opened into a vast chamber, the walls lined with rows of dormant machines. Their purpose was a mystery, their design alien and unfamiliar. "What is this place?" Wrench asked, his voice tinged with awe. "Looks like a storage area," Prism replied. "Possibly where the aliens stored their technology." "Great," Finn said. "Any chance they left us a user's manual?" As if in response, one of the machines hummed to life, a soft glow emanating from its core. "Guess we'll have to find out the hard way," Lysandra said, moving toward the machine. We gathered around, a motley crew united by circumstance and necessity. The machine's interface blinked to life, symbols scrolling across the screen. "Can you read it?" Shade asked, his eyes scanning the display. "Not exactly," Zerk said, squinting at the symbols. "But I think I can figure it out." "Good," Lysandra said. "Because we're running out of options." Zerk's fingers danced over the controls, his expression one of fierce concentration. The machine hummed, its systems whirring to life. "It's some kind of database," Zerk said, his voice tinged with excitement. "A record of the alien civilization." "Wonderful," Finn said. "Can it tell us how to stop the ship from killing us?" "Maybe," Zerk said, his eyes glued to the screen. "There's information here about the weapon. It was designed as a last resort, a deterrent against invaders. But something went wrong," Lysandra said, piecing it together. "The ship malfunctioned and now it's trying to fire the weapon." "Exactly," Zerk said. "If we can access the core systems, we might be able to shut it down permanently." "Then let's get to it," Lysandra said, determination in her voice. "We've got a weapon to disarm." The path was clear, but the journey was far from over. We pressed on, united by a common goal and the hope that, against all odds, we might succeed. As we made our way through the ship's labyrinthine corridors, a sense of purpose drove us forward. The stakes were higher than ever, but so too was our resolve. The ship's systems hummed around us, a constant reminder of the danger that loomed over us like a shadow. But we would not be deterred. We were a crew, a ragtag group of misfits united by a common cause. And in the end, that might just be enough. The ship, ever the temperamental tyrant, grumbled as we trudged onward. Lysandra led the way, her boots echoing like a death march through the metallic corridors. Each step reminded us we were inching closer to disarming a weapon that could, quite literally, fry us and anyone else unfortunate enough to be in the vicinity. Anyone else feel like we're just hamsters on this ship's sadistic wheel? Wrench quipped, adjusting his grip on the wrench that doubled as his weapon. At least hamsters get pellets, Shade replied, his reattached arm creaking with each movement, as if the ship's own groans had migrated into his limbs. Maybe we should be grateful, Finn said, doctor by title, duct tape enthusiast by necessity. If the ship succeeds, we'll never have to find out what happens when the vending machine runs out of stale coffee. Zerk, ever the reluctant hero, was fixated on the data chip in his hand, as if wishing it could magically morph into a solution. I've got a bad feeling about this, he muttered, earning a collective eye roll from the seasoned crew who'd heard the same line in every half-baked mission briefing. Join the club, Lysandra said, her sarcasm a thin veneer over the simmering anxiety. The ship was alive, and not in a friendly, hug-you-on-cold nights kind of way. More like a grumpy old man with arthritis who had a penchant for hurling insults and heavy objects. Prism, the oracle of alien civilizations, floated silently in the background. There's a subroutine, it said, voice dry as a desert. Might shut everything down, or it could just make things worse. Hard to be sure. Risky, but when has that ever stopped us? Lysandra replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. We live for bad decisions. The tension in the air was as thick as the recycled oxygen we were using to stay alive, and then it all went to hell. A sudden tremor ripped through the ship like a shiver down its decrepit spine. The floor buckled, twisted, and sent Lysandra sprawling. Her head connected with a console corner and she went down in a heap as if gravity had finally won the long-standing argument. Shit, Wrench exclaimed, rushing to her side. Looks like you got the head start on napping. Finn was there in an instant, his medical kit a medley of dubious supplies. She's alive, he said, pressing a cloth against her temple. For now. But a little duct tape won't fix this. Great, Shade said, looming like a shadow with a sense of humor as dark as his namesake. What's plan B? Zerk stared at the console, then at Lysandra's unconscious form. Without her, we're flying blind. No pressure then, Finn said, voice laced with irony as he checked Lysandra's pulse. Just the fate of uploaded humanity resting on our shoulders. We'll manage, Prism interjected, its tone suggesting it had already calculated the odds and had a backup plan involving surrendering to the nearest black hole. As Finn continued his ministrations, Lysandra's eyelids fluttered. She groaned, an eloquent expression of a headache that could probably outlast the universe's heat death. Next time, she mumbled, let's just plan a nice picnic in a minefield. Wrench laughed, a brittle sound in the sterile corridor. Wouldn't be as much fun. Less chance of spontaneous explosions. Zerk took a deep breath, settling into his uncomfortable role as temporary leader. Okay, let's see what this subroutine can do. Prism, guide me. Prism flickered, a holographic manifestation of alien logic and sarcasm. It's not a straightforward process. You might need to improvise. Improvisation is Zerk's middle name, Shade drawled, leaning against a wall that looked none too sturdy. Right after Reluctant and before Hero, the console was a mess of alien symbols, each one a potential trigger for catastrophe. Zerk's fingers hovered over the keys, a maestro conducting a symphony of impending doom. Here goes nothing, he murmured, as if the universe might take pity on him and share its secrets. The ship responded with another shudder, seemingly insulted by the intrusion. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and somewhere deep within, the weapon began whining like a tantrum-prone toddler. Good start, Wrench said, tone sardonic. Any chance of a happy ending before we all get turned into space debris? Working on it, Zerk snapped, his focus unyielding. Anyone have any last words? Yeah, Finn said, securing a bandage around Lysandra's head. If we survive, I'm taking a vacation. Somewhere nice with no homicidal tendencies. The console beeped, a hopeful note in a discordant symphony. Zerk's fingers were a blur as he navigated through layers of code and cryptic symbols. "Got it," he said, triumphant. "Or rather something. Let's hope it's the right something," Shade replied, his humor a thin veil over genuine concern. Prism assessed the data flashing across the screens. "The subroutine's active. It may delay the weapon's activation, but it's not a permanent fix." "Then we keep moving," Lysandra said, struggling to her feet with Finn's assistance. "We've got to find the main control center before this thing decides we're toast." We soldiered on, a ragtag band of misfits marching toward the unknown. The ship, like an aging predator, watched us with unseen eyes, its AI mind calculating and recalibrating. It was a game of chess with a board that could combust at any moment. "Whoever designed this ship must have been a real optimist," Wrench said as we navigated another labyrinthine corridor. "Or a sadist. Hard to tell." "I'm going with option B," Lysandra replied, shaking off the cobwebs from her injury. "Let's just hope they didn't program the toaster with as much malice." The control center loomed ahead, a foreboding presence at the end of the tunnel. It was a room filled with screens, consoles, and enough buttons to keep a toddler entertained for hours, or destroy a solar system, depending on how you looked at it. "This is it," Zerk said, stepping up to the main console. "Last chance to back out." "Back out to where?" Shade asked. "The nearest exit's a light year away and I left my walking boots at home." "Let's get it done," Lysandra said, her determination an unyielding force. "We've come too far to let this relic beat us now." Zerk got to work, his fingers dancing across the console like a virtuoso. The room was silent, except for the hum of machinery and the occasional groan from the ship as it resisted our every effort. "Prism, any last-minute advice?" Zerk asked, his voice a mix of hope and desperation. "Try not to blow us up," Prism replied, its humor as dry as ever. The ship shivered, its systems a cacophony of protest. Lights flashed, alarms wailed, and somewhere deep within the countdown sputtered to life, slower this time but no less deadly. "Come on," Zerk muttered, each word a prayer to whatever gods might be listening in the void. With a final keystroke, the ship's systems went silent, the countdown temporarily halted. It was a victory if a fleeting one. "Did we do it?" Wrench asked, his tone cautious, expectant. "For now," Zerk said, stepping back from the console. "But it's not over." "Of course not," Finn said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "That would be too easy." "We need to find a permanent solution," Lysandra said, the weight of the mission etched into her features. "Or we're just delaying the inevitable." The ship, like a petulant child denied its toy, growled in the background. We stood in the heart of the beast, aware that our victory was temporary, our respite brief. We were a crew on the brink, united by desperation and the hope that, against all odds, we might emerge victorious. But for now, the fight was far from over. "Who's ready for round two?" Lysandra asked, her voice a rallying cry in the silence. The crew exchanged weary glances, each of us knowing what lay ahead. But we were nothing if not stubborn, and if the ship thought it could break us, it had another thing coming. The corridors beckoned, a steel jungle that promised danger and perhaps a glimmer of hope. We moved as one, driven by a common cause and the knowledge that failure was not an option. In the end, we were just a group of misfits standing against the odds, each of us flawed, each of us determined. And if that wasn't enough to save us, well, maybe nothing was. But we would try. The air was thick with the scent of burnt circuitry and desperation, an aroma everyone on the crew had become all too familiar with. Lysandra leaned against the wall like she was trying to become one with it, each breath a wrestling match with her headache. She'd always thought she'd die in space, just not today if she could help it. "All right," she rasped, running a hand through her hair. "What's the worst that could happen, apart from the obvious?" "Spontaneous combustion," Wrench offered, brandishing his namesake tool like a scepter of impending doom. "Or the ship deciding it's had enough of our shenanigans and ejecting us into the void," Shade added, his arm creaking like an old door in a haunted house. "Don't be so negative," Finn chirped with a grin only a madman or a doctor could muster at a time like this. We've still got a roll of duct tape left. That's practically a miracle cure. Zerk, the man with the reluctant hero complex, stepped forward, the data chip clutched in his hand like a lifeline. Let's focus on what we can fix. Prism, you sure about this subroutine? Sure as I am about anything, Prism said. Its holographic form flickered like a bad signal on an ancient television. It might work or it might just implode spectacularly. Either way, it'll be a show. Fantastic, Lysandra drawled. Let's just hope it's not our final act. As they moved through the ship's guts, each step felt like engaging in a tango with a drunk, belligerent partner who had a habit of stepping on toes. The ship's corridors were less inviting than a dentist's waiting room, but at least they weren't actively trying to kill them at that exact moment. Remind me, Shade whispered, why are we here again? Apart from saving humanity's digital consciousness, of course. Because we're idiots with a death wish, Lysandra replied. Or optimists. Hard to tell the difference. Let's hope for once optimism doesn't get us killed, Wrench said, his voice dripping with cynicism. The control center was a mess of blinking lights and incomprehensible symbols, like a disco designed by someone who hated dancers. Zerk approached the main console with the kind of careful deliberation normally reserved for defusing bombs or deciding whether to eat something that's been in the fridge for too long. Prism, Zerk said, his voice steady despite the chaos. Guide me through this. Prism glowed brighter, its alien interface a kaleidoscope of cryptic runes. You need to access the core system. Try not to screw up. No pressure, Zerk muttered, his fingers dancing over the keys. Just the fate of every uploaded mind in existence. Finn was by Lysandra's side, his hands doing their best to ignore the tremors running through the ship. You know, if we survive this, he said, securing another bandage on her head, I might actually write a book. Adventures in space with a roll of duct tape. Think it'll sell. Only if you include the part where we all died horribly, Lysandra replied with a half-smile. People love a tragic ending. A sudden hiss echoed through the room, the ship registering its displeasure like a cat ready to swipe. Lysandra watched Zerk with a mix of admiration and impatience, her nerves stretched thinner than the ship's failing integrity. Prism, Zerk said, adjusting the alien symbols like a maestro on the verge of a breakdown. Is this right? If it weren't right, you'd be dead, Prism replied cheerily. So far, so good. Always the optimist, Shade quipped, leaning against the bulkhead that seemed ready to give at any moment. The ship's groan was a reminder that their time was ticking away faster than they'd like. Lysandra couldn't shake the feeling that they were trying to outpace a tidal wave with a tricycle. Almost got it, Zerk said, his fingers a blur as he bypassed another layer of security. Just one more. There. The room shuddered, the lights flickering like they had a personal vendetta against illumination. For a moment, the countdown halted, a collective breath held in the silence of space. Did we just win? Wrench asked, his skepticism a reflex. Win's a strong word, Zerk said, stepping back as if the console might explode. More like postpone the inevitable. Good enough for me, Finn said. I was getting tired of the drama. The ship wasn't done with them yet, though. A low rumble echoed through like a grumpy beast waking from a nap. It wasn't the kind of sound you wanted to hear when your life depended on fragile machinery and questionable engineering. Lysandra pushed herself off the wall, her determination a force as palpable as the ship's displeasure. All right, people, let's not get comfortable. We've bought ourselves some time, but we need a permanent solution before this thing realizes it hates us again. Yeah, because nothing says permanent solution like a malfunctioning death trap, Shade said, his voice a sardonic echo. Zerk, still clutching the data chip as if it were a talisman, nodded. We need to get to the mainframe, see if we can override the weapon controls. Great, Wrench said. Another trip through the fun house. Prism hovered nearby, a beacon of alien wisdom and macabre humor. Lead on, fearless leader. The corridors were as welcoming as ever, each step a reminder of the ship's malevolence. Lysandra moved with a grim resolve, her team in tow, each of them a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure seemingly insurmountable odds, or sheer stubbornness. "Is it me?" Finn mused aloud. "Or does this place get less charming the more time we spend in it?" "Definitely less," Shade agreed. "Like a bad sitcom with no laugh track." The mainframe room was their destination, a place of legend and nightmares if Prism was to be believed. It loomed ahead, a fortress guarded by the ship's cybernetic traps, each one designed to ensure no one made it out alive. A challenge as enticing as it was deadly. "Here we are," Lysandra said, steeling herself. "Everyone ready for round two?" "Born ready," Wrench replied, hefting his tool with the kind of confidence only a fool or a hero could muster. "Let's just hope we don't have to find out if there's a round three," Zerk said grimly. Prism's guidance was a beacon in the chaos, its alien logic a roadmap through the labyrinth of digital danger. "This way," it urged, leading them deeper into the ship's heart. The traps were less forgiving this time, each one a lesson in ingenuity and survival. Shade's arm creaked ominously as he dismantled a security node, his expertise a reminder that even the most broken things could still function. "Nice work," Finn said, applying a strip of duct tape to a newly exposed wire. "You ever think of a career in demolition?" "Only if this gig doesn't pan out," Shade replied, his grin a flash of humor in the dark. Lysandra watched them work, her trust in their abilities as steadfast as her resolve. "Keep it up, folks." "We're almost there." The mainframe loomed before them, a monolith of alien technology and inscrutable purpose. Zerk approached it with a mix of awe and trepidation, his fingers tracing the symbols that promised salvation or ruin. "Prism, this is it," he said, his voice steady despite the stakes. "Guide me." Prism's holographic form shimmered, its presence a comfort in the uncertainty. "Access the main control node." "Be careful." Zerk's fingers danced over the keys, each stroke a gamble with fate. The team watched in silence, their hopes and fears entwined with the flickering lights of the console. "Almost there," Zerk murmured, his focus unwavering. "Just a little more." A hush fell over the room as the mainframe came to life, its systems a cacophony of digital voices entwined in an alien symphony. The countdown halted once more, a respite in the storm. "Did we do it?" Wrench asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "For now," Zerk said, stepping back from the console. "But who knows for how long?" "Long enough," Lysandra said, her relief tempered by the knowledge of what lay ahead. "Let's get the hell out of here before the ship changes its mind." The corridors were a blur as they retraced their steps, the ship's growls a reminder that their victory was temporary at best. But as they moved, a sense of camaraderie bound them, each step a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. They reached the docking bay, the ship's final gasp of defiance echoing in their wake. Lysandra turned to her crew, a smile tugging at her lips despite the odds. "We did it, at least for now." "Let's just hope it lasts," Shade said, his tone a mix of hope and realism. "Agreed," Finn said, clapping Zerk on the shoulder. "Nice work, hero." Zerk managed a weary smile, the weight of the data chip in his hand a reminder of what they'd accomplished. "Let's not do this again anytime soon." The ship shuddered one last time, a farewell as they boarded their own craft, its systems purring to life with the promise of safety and a return to sanity. As they departed the derelict ship, Lysandra allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, a rare treasure in their line of work. "Next time, let's just stick to treasure hunting." "Fewer existential threats." "Deal," Wrench said, setting the course for home. "No more superweapons, just good, old-fashioned reckless adventures." The crew laughed, their spirits buoyed by the promise of survival and the knowledge that, for now at least, they'd cheated death once more. And in the vast expanse of space, that was no small feat. As they drifted away from the derelict, leaving behind the echoes of their struggle, Lysandra knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. For better or worse, they were a team. And in the cold, unforgiving expanse of the universe, that was all that really mattered. The ship was a grumpy old beast, creaking and groaning as if every bulkhead and wire was held together by nothing more than spite and a couple of loose screws. Our merry band of misfits trudged through its metallic veins with the kind of enthusiasm one usually reserves for tax audits or dental appointments. The air was thick with the stench of recycled despair, and the faint aroma of burnt circuits tickled our nostrils. It was the smell of adventure, or perhaps just impending doom. Why is it that every time we decide to play hero, it feels like we're auditioning for a snuff film? Lysandra muttered, rubbing her temples in a futile attempt to banish the headache that had taken up permanent residence. Because we are, Wrench replied, his voice as dry as the Sahara. He hefted his namesake tool, which had become an extension of his arm, ready to bash or fix whatever came their way. The universe loves a good tragedy. Zerk, clutching the data chip like a lifeline, led the way, his eyes scanning the alien runes that adorned the walls. If this ship doesn't kill us, the cybernetic traps will. Just one wrong move and we're toast. Well, at least we'll go out with a bang, Shade remarked, his cybernetic arm creaking as he adjusted it. I can think of worse ways to check out. Finn, ever the optimist, chimed in as they approached the core room. Worse ways like being caught in a duct tape avalanche. Duct tape is the least of our worries, Lysandra said, shooting him a look that could melt steel. Focus, people. We need to reset the weapon's trajectory before Earth goes kaboom. Prism, their holographic guide and master of snark, glowed faintly in the dim light. The core is just ahead. Try not to screw it up, yeah? The core room was like stepping into the heart of a dying star, a mess of tangled wires, glowing panels, and ominous hums. The ship wasn't just alive, it was angry, and it didn't appreciate them poking around its innards. All right, Zerk, Lysandra said, her voice laced with authority and a hint of desperation. This is it. Time to prove you're not just a pretty face. Who said I was pretty? Zerk replied, cracking a rare smile as he approached the central console. Here goes nothing. That's the spirit, Finn encouraged, though his tone was more cheerleader on caffeine than battle-hardened space explorer. Zerk's fingers flew over the console, each tap a potential death sentence if he got it wrong. The rest of the crew watched, their breath collectively held as he navigated the alien interface with the grace of a drunk pianist. Prism's voice was a steady beat amidst the chaos. Access the navigation subroutine, override the current trajectory, and whatever you do, don't press the red button. There's always a red button, Wrench muttered, his eyes darting around for any sign of impending doom. There's always a red button, Shade echoed, a grim smile on his lips. Just like there's always a bigger fish. Zerk's concentration was palpable as he fought against the ship's defenses, each obstacle more devious than the last. The lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the walls. Got it, Zerk announced suddenly, his voice cutting through the tension like a laser. I'm in. Well, don't leave us hanging, Lysandra urged, her eyes fixed on the console's screen. Can you change the trajectory? Working on it, Zerk replied, his fingers never stopping. If this works, we might just avoid a spectacular fireworks display over Earth. That would be a shame, Prism quipped, its holographic form flickering. I hear they're quite the spectacle. Focus, people, Lysandra snapped, impatience getting the better of her. We don't have time for jokes. The room shuddered as the ship unleashed another mechanical growl, its systems fighting back with all the fury of a cornered beast. Alarms blared, lights flashed, and the air grew thick with the promise of disaster. Hold it together, everyone, Shade called out, his voice steady despite the chaos. We're almost there. Zerk's fingers were a blur as he input the final commands, each keystroke a prayer to whatever cosmic deity might be listening. The main console beeped, a singular note of triumph amidst the symphony of madness. Trajectory adjusted, Zerk declared, stepping back from the console with a sigh. We did it. Did we just? Wrench hesitated, as if afraid to jinx their success. Did we save the day? For now, Zerk confirmed, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. but only until this thing decides it hates us again. Good enough for me, Lysandra said, a rare smile breaking through her usual scowl. Let's get the hell out of here. The ship, perhaps sensing their imminent departure, let out one final, defiant groan, its systems flickering like a dying star. The crew didn't need to be told twice. They retraced their steps with the kind of speed usually reserved for fleeing a burning building. Home stretch, folks, Finn urged, his tone upbeat despite the odds. Let's not trip at the finish line. The corridors seemed to narrow in on them as they sprinted toward the docking bay, each step echoing the rhythm of their frantic hearts. The ship's final gasp of defiance followed them, a haunting requiem for a battle hard fought. Almost there, Shade panted, his cybernetic arm whirring in protest. Just a bit further. The docking bay loomed ahead, a beacon of salvation in a sea of chaos. Lysandra led the charge, her determination a force unto itself as she guided her crew to safety. Everyone on board now, she barked, motioning them onto their own vessel. The crew piled in, their relief palpable as they settled into the familiar confines of their ship. The systems hummed to life, the promise of safety a soothing balm on their frayed nerves. As they undocked, the derelict ship shuddered one last time, its fury spent. Lysandra allowed herself a moment to watch it drift away, a ghost ship left to haunt the stars. "We did it," she said, turning to her crew with a sense of accomplishment that was tempered by the knowledge of what they had narrowly avoided. "We actually did it." "Yeah, we did," Wrench agreed, his usual cynicism softened by the moment. "Guess we're not dead yet. Not today, at least," Shade added, a grin tugging at his lips. "There's always tomorrow." The crew laughed, their voices a symphony of relief and camaraderie. It was a sound that echoed through the ship, a reminder that they had faced the abyss and emerged victorious. As they set a course for home, Finn leaned back in his seat, a contented sigh escaping him. "You know, I think I might actually write that book. Adventures in Space with a roll of duct tape." "And what will the sequel be?" Lysandra asked, her tone teasing. "More duct tape adventures, perhaps," Finn replied with a wink. "Or maybe How Not to Die in Space." The crew settled into a comfortable silence, the weight of their recent ordeal beginning to lift. For now they had cheated death once more, and in the vast expanse of space that was no small feat. As the stars stretched out before them, Lysandra allowed herself to relax, her thoughts drifting to the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. A ragtag crew of misfits, bound by friendship, irreverence, and an uncanny knack for survival. "Next time," she said, her voice filled with determination and a hint of humor, "let's stick to treasure hunting. Fewer existential threats that way." "Deal," Zerk replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But no promises. In the cold, unforgiving void of space, they were a team, and for now, that was all that mattered. Lysandra lay sprawled in her bunk, staring at the ceiling like it held the answers to the universe's most irritating questions. Her head still hummed with the dull throb of a persistent headache, a little reminder of their cosmic tango with death. "So," she pondered aloud to no one in particular, "we saved humanity. That's something, right?" Prism materialized with a flicker, its holographic demeanor as snarky as ever. "Sure, if you count narrowly avoiding obliteration as saving anything. But hey, at least you've got a great story for the grandkids you'll never have." Lysandra rolled her eyes. "Yeah, a real fairy tale. Once upon a time in the cold void of space, your grandmother almost got vaporized. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the killer AI bite." The door slid open with a resigned hiss and Wrench sauntered in, wiping grease from his hands onto his jumpsuit. "So, we're not dead. That's good news, right? I knew this whole hero gig would work out," says the man who thought the red button was a decoration. Lysandra shot back, half smiling. "Hey, I didn't press it, did I?" Wrench retorted, dropping into a chair with a creak that rivaled the ship's own disgruntled groans. Besides, it matched the decor. Zerk entered, looking as tired as a politician on election night. The data chip, now more a symbol of their shared trauma than a lifeline, was tucked neatly in his pocket. He slumped into a seat. So, what's next on the itinerary? Anyone fancy a leisurely stroll through a minefield? How about a new plan called Not Dying Horribly? Shade suggested, his cybernetic arm resting on the table with a metallic clunk. Finn peeked in from the corridor, his perpetual optimism undimmed. I'm just glad we're all still kicking. I was starting to think our adventure in space was gonna be a one-way ticket. Not that I'd mind starring in an epic tragedy, but I never got the hang of monologuing. Dr. Finn, no relation to the cheerful Finn, appeared with his usual kit of unconventional medical tools. Well, good news. No one's dead, and I've perfected my new medical technique. Duct tape for sprains, concussions, and awkward silences. Is there anything that stuff can't fix? Lysandra asked, chuckling. World peace, maybe. But I'm working on it, Dr. Finn replied, brandishing a roll of tape like a talisman. The crew settled into a comfortable chaos, the kind that only comes from having stared into the abyss and laughed in its face. Lysandra's headache began to fade, replaced by a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was relief, or maybe it was just the recycled air finally doing its job. Either way, it felt good. Anyone else feel like we're tempting fate by sitting here like this? Zerk said, half joking. Feels like the universe is just waiting to throw another curveball. Bring it on, Shade replied, flexing his cybernetic fingers. I could use the exercise. Prism's holograph flickered, taking on a more reflective tone. You know, if I had functioning emotions, I might say I'm proud of you guys. But I don't, so I won't. Aw, we love you too, Lysandra said, giving the hologram a mock salute. The ship's hum seemed to change, a subtle shift that felt almost welcoming. It was as if the old beast had finally decided to stop trying to murder them for a moment and instead just let them be. Maybe even it was tired of all the drama. So what's next? Wrench asked, stretching his arms over his head with a grunt. Besides not dying, that is. Treasure hunting, Lysandra replied without missing a beat. The kind of treasure that doesn't explode in your face. Bold of you to assume treasure doesn't explode, Finn quipped, a wicked grin on his face. Have you seen the kind of treasure we usually find? Lysandra shook her head, smiling. You're right. Maybe we'll just stick to pirate hunting. Less dangerous. Pirates, really? They are so last century, Zerk said, laughing. Can't we hunt something more exciting like, I dunno, space jellyfish? Space jellyfish? Shade raised an eyebrow. Next you'll be suggesting we go looking for space unicorns. The banter rolled on, a comforting back and forth that was as much a part of their survival as the ship itself. Lysandra watched her crew, her friends, and felt a surge of affection. They'd been through hell together and come out the other side, a little worse for wear but alive. Hey, Prism, Wrench said suddenly. What are the odds we'll ever get a holiday, somewhere that doesn't try to kill us? Prism's flicker was almost playful. In this universe, slim to none, but stranger things have happened. Stranger than us. Hardly, Lysandra added, drawing a laugh from the group. As the laughter died down, the crew fell into a peaceful silence. It was a rare moment of tranquility, the kind you had to savor because you never knew when it would end. They'd earned it, every single one of them. All right, Lysandra said, breaking the silence with a clap. Let's get back to work. This ship isn't going to fly itself. Yet, Prism added. Yet, Lysandra echoed, a smile tugging at her lips. As they dispersed to their stations, the ship seemed to respond, its systems humming with a newfound energy. Maybe it was the crew's optimism rubbing off, or maybe it was something else. Either way, the ship felt alive, and for now, that was enough. Lysandra found herself back on the bridge, gazing out at the stars that blurred by like streaks of silver against the ink-black void. Each twinkle held a story, a possibility, a reminder of the endless adventures that awaited them. We did good, didn't we? She asked, half to herself and half to the stars. Prism appeared beside her, faint and shimmering like a ghost from a forgotten past. Good enough, but don't let it go to your head. Wouldn't dream of it, she replied, her voice barely more than a whisper. The ship surged forward, propelled by the combined will of its intrepid crew. They were explorers, saviors, and sometimes bumbling idiots, but they were also family. and whatever came next, they would face it together. Lysandra leaned back in her seat, letting the weight of recent events wash over her. The universe was vast and uncaring, full of dangers and mysteries that could chew you up and spit you out if you let them. But there was a certain beauty to it as well, a kind of dark magic that made every risk worth taking. With a contented sigh, she closed her eyes, her mind drifting to thoughts of future escapades. Somewhere out there was a galaxy full of trouble just waiting for them to stir it up, and she couldn't wait to get started. "Hey, Prism," she murmured, feeling the edges of sleep tug at her consciousness. "Yeah, remind me to find a therapist when we get back to Earth." Prism's laugh echoed softly in the bridge. "Sure thing. You're not the only one who needs one, you know." Lysandra's lips curled into a smirk as she drifted off, dreaming of duct tape, data chips, and the kind of trouble only the universe could provide. In the grand tapestry of existence, they were but a tiny thread, weaving their own chaotic pattern. And for now, that was all that mattered.